This is Housebound. I'm Chris.
I'm Holly.
I'm Ashlynn.
I'm Greg.
And you're invited. Hey folks, welcome to Housebound. This is a podcast we made because we want a little bit of company, just to keep ourselves busy while we were a bit isolated from each other. We usually talk about things that are just on our minds for that day, and today we're going to be talking about things that we collect and what we collect and kind of what is collecting or what it looks like to us. Before we start though, I just want to thank you, our listeners. We have as of this recording, we've reached over 100 downloads and plays on our episodes, which is fantastic. It doesn't seem like a huge milestone, but we're pretty pumped about that. So on to today's topic. You know, Webster's dictionary defines collecting as something collected, especially an accumulation of objects gathered for study, comparison, or exaltation,
Brutal.
or as a hobby.
You sound like a valid Victorian.
Yeah.
I know. Actually, when I was doing some research, I found that Wikipedia actually defines hobby a little bit more specifically, and I think that that's important for us because I doubt any of us are specifically collecting things for study or comparison, although we tend to do that with the things that we collect. For us, it's mostly as a hobby type situation. So Wikipedia calls hobby collecting things that include seeking, locating, acquiring, organizing, cataloging, displaying, storing, and maintaining items that are of interest to an individual, specifically an individual collector. So I think that fits exactly with what we're going to talk about. And I just liked that nice little definition because it helped me kind of narrow down exactly the things that I was interested in talking about in regards to collecting. Often there's this like discrepancy between what is collecting and what is hoarding. And I mean, we can go back and forth on this and have a whole other episode about it. But really the biggest difference that I found was, you know, collecting is when you acquire things and then you put them on display for others to see, whether that's for yourself or for, you know, visitors or whatever. And a lot of people take collecting to the extreme where they have whole rooms in their houses that are dedicated to the things that they've collected. But at least in my case, there's a lot of stuff that I still have that's packed in boxes because as somebody that rents and doesn't own a house, you often struggle for space to display things or the ability to display things the way that you want, right? So
also, as somebody that has a wife that doesn't want your weird collecting garbage all over her house, they are in boxes.
Personally, I'm under the impression that everybody collects things, which is not something that you should fact check. It's just a statement that I feel like is true. So there's obvious collections of things like toys or movies or books or artwork or video games, etc. But then there's inconspicuous collections, things that people maybe don't even realize that it's something that they collect. It's just something that they are interested in, which becomes a collection. So for some people, that's things like family recipes or wearable tech or
blankets.
Sure, or blankets, or
I have a lot of blankets.
Instead of video games, it could be video game achievements. So where you might not go around collecting every video game that comes out, you might be the kind of person that's very dedicated and maybe borderline obsessed with completing every achievement available in whatever video game you do play, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Unturned.
Yeah, exactly. And something that I just wanted to, for the people that might be listening that might already be distancing themselves mentally from this conversation just because of their impressions on what collecting is and isn't, I really don't believe that there's any difference between your knowledge of let's say a fictional element or world that you collect around or in, and things in real world that you collect or are around or in. So for a really good example, I love Star Wars. I love the Star Wars franchise. I know people that love sports. Now you might say, well, how useful is it that you know all the different types of starfighters that show up in this one scene of this one movie and what their capabilities are or aren't, and where their engines are built within the universe and who pilots that specific ship and et cetera, et cetera. But then I turn it around and I look at the people that know all of, to me, what is completely useless information about these baseball players that have had this many strikes in this quarter of the season and this and that, and the football players have this many touchdowns and they've been playing for this long. Like, it's all the same. All of it is irrelevant, and all of it is just completely only useful to the person and the community that they are a part of.
I mean, if you gamble, maybe the sports knowledge is like slightly useful if you gamble. But that's all.
Maybe.
Or if the Star Wars might be useful in a trivia night. I don't know.
Which I guess is gambling because you're paying for a ticket to potentially win a prize.
That's true.
Pretty low risk gambling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to isolate, like, for instance, sports people, but I also wanted it to be clear that when I'm talking about collecting, I'm talking about the accumulation of things or knowledge. And today I'm going to be talking mostly about things, and depending on what you guys have to add to the conversation, that might stay the case. But I just wanted to put that out there just to make it a more well-rounded conversation. I have begun several collections in my life, and when I was younger, it was whatever I could afford at that time. And so there were, by the time I got married, I had partial collections of many things that I have since gotten rid of or since sold, or I might be still trying to collect it if I've deemed it worthy of continuing the collection. But these were things like Star Wars Pez dispensers. Like, I had a handful of them when I was a kid because they were cheap and easy to buy and I could find them. And character keychains, $5 bin DVDs from Walmart, which I'll get into it a little bit later as to why those things just like grind on me now. But those are included with those like double-sided DVDs that come in like a 4-pack, and they just bother me so much now. I can't believe that I ever did buy them. Burger King toys for movie promotions. Okay, so those kinds of things that were cheap and they were easily accessible to me when I didn't have things like a credit card that I could go online, or I didn't have a vehicle that I could go drive out of my parents' way to get to the store that I needed to get to buy what I wanted to collect. So mostly I would say now the biggest thing that has carried over from my childhood collection, so to say, to now is movies. That is definitely the biggest and most focused of my collections, and that's because I love watching movies, and I also love to be able to share something with somebody and say, oh, here, this was a great movie, watch it. There's no particular sensible reasoning for why I can't just be content with watching it once in the theater, or watching it on a streaming service if I can find it, or renting it online if I want to find it. There's something about it that I have to own a movie that I really, really like. Makes it a little bit more personal, maybe. I don't know. Let's not get into the psychiatry behind that. But yeah, like I said, the first things that I collected for movies were DVDs, like those combo packs that you get from Walmart of like the Matrix series or the Superman series that are double-sided DVDs, and they scratch really easily because they come in and out of the cases on both sides, and they have to be playable on both sides, but you get fingerprints on them when you're putting them into the player and stuff. And eventually I moved into, I think Blu-ray became a really big thing in like 2006. And so when it came time for me to purchase my first Blu-ray, I really definitely made a conscious effort to start only purchasing Blu-ray DVD combo packs. And the reasoning behind that for me was I don't want to keep buying DVDs if I can buy a superior quality disc. And I don't have a Blu-ray player now, but I have a DVD player. So if I can buy the combo pack, it's watchable now and it's watchable in the future when I buy a Blu-ray player, which I figured I would do at some point. And so in 2010 or 2011, whenever they released the Guy Ritchie reboot of the Sherlock Holmes movies with Jude Law and Robert Downey Jr., that first movie was my first Blu-ray DVD combo pack. I just vividly remember that was the first one that I bought for no particular reason, but it was
Big moment in your life.
yeah, it was like a milestone.
Vivid images now that you see on the screen, so it's just
Yeah. Yeah. So then from there, as the world and technology progresses, DVDs are still a thing, but they're slowly getting left in the dust a bit. And we're moving more towards digital copies of things. But I still like that physical aspect of like disc, that tangible CD or that book I can pull off the shelf or the movie I can slip into the player. I still like those hands-on aspects of those things, and that's why I collect the physical thing. But now I focus my attention more on Blu-ray and digital copy packs when I can find those, if I can't find a Blu-ray and DVD and digital copy pack, because now Blu-ray is kind of the mainstream thing and most people have Blu-ray players now. And the people that don't, we can get together and we can watch a digital copy of it on my iTunes account or Google Play account or wherever I have that. And especially what I've been collecting, the Marvel movies, the last third, like the last 5 or 6 of those movies in what exists up to 2020 have all been DVD only or DVD and digital copy and Blu-ray and digital copy, but no Blu-ray and DVD and digital copy. So I've kind of abandoned the whole Blu-ray DVD combo pack thought line because it's going to become less and less likely that will be available to me. So
Because you're a man of the future.
that's right.
Chris, you haven't yet jumped on the whole 4K Blu-ray combo pack yet?
That is correct. And my reasoning behind not jumping on that is kind of the same reason that I didn't jump behind the 3D Blu-ray stuff very heavily. And it's because from what I understand about that technology, you have to have a compatible player and a compatible television in order to play those specific 3D or 4K discs. And even at that point, unless you have a theater room in your basement in order for your eyes to actually notice the difference, I'm never going to be in a position where that's going to be the case. And the only times I will be in a position where that's the case is when I go to the theater and I just watch it in the theater. So I have been totally content with not purchasing the 4K or the 3D. That might change. Like I started out doing DVDs, so maybe I'll move there. But what I'm curious to hear from you three now is what kind of things, or maybe you only have one thing that you collect or that you don't even really consider a collection, but I'd like to hear kind of what your take on collecting is and how you approach it or how you stay away from it.
I collect blankets. I've realized while sitting in front of this massive pile of blankets, they don't mean anything to me other than the functionality of the warmth. But I also kind of collect Pokemon on Pokemon Go, but I also don't really care about them. And one thing I do care about is books. I like to have a whole collection of books, and then if I decide that I'm not ever going to read the whole series again, then I'll sell them all together. Yeah, I don't really collect. I don't mind. Well, Chris and I actually have a collection of Funko Pops, and I really like those. They're cool, but we are pretty specific about which ones we buy because the collection, like, they can be really expensive if you buy them when they're not on sale. So we do have quite a few of those, and someday when we have a home that we can display those, we will display those because they're cool. But that's really the only collection that I super care about, I think.
Yeah, and typically those people that collect the pop vinyls, which are what we collect from generally movies and TV shows characters, will keep them in their box and even put those boxes into protective cases that you can purchase, which cost almost as much as the character themselves.
Do they put those cases into a safe then? And each individual ones?
Yeah. And that safe into a flammable box that they then burn?
Yeah.
Usually they'll put them into a room in their house, or they'll have their YouTube filming room just lined with them in the backdrop. But
I don't think that this is most people.
With its own air conditioning system.
You preface this with most people who collect these. I doubt that very highly. maybe I'm not in the wrong realm.
Air
I don't
quotes.
own a single Funko Pop. I have little to no desire to own a single Funko Pop.
No, I said
But do you
most
think
people that
most
collect
people
them.
who have them?
Ashlynn has more hope for humanity.
Based on what I've seen from people that put their collections up online for viewing or for selling, and where you usually purchase them from on Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji, they're almost always kept in the box. And the ones
Really?
that aren't in the box go for just a couple of bucks as opposed to 10 or 15 or 20
Okay,
because
maybe.
they
I
don't
can
have the
maybe
box,
give
and
you
the
that one.
box is the value. It adds the value to it, which is
Oh.
why when people collect things, they keep them sealed, which is part of the reason that I could never bring myself to continue any of my collections from when I was a kid, because I could never bring myself to keep something that was completely sealed. At least with movies, I can watch them. And with the Funkos, we actually unbox them and recycle the boxes. So no hate mail towards me, please.
Oh, I'm so proud of you. Way to go.
Well,
Congratulations.
we would never have room for all of it.
But
Yeah,
I
it's-
want to say that I applaud you for recycling the boxes and not keeping a pile of empty boxes. That takes a lot of emotional effort on your behalf, and I appreciate it. Way to go. I want to acknowledge that.
Okay, well, if you're being sincere, then thanks. But
You're welcome.
It doesn't seem like that much of a stretch to me, because I'm pretty resigned to the fact that I can keep them. I can keep all of the characters that we don't currently display, which is most of them, in a box that looks like it was at one point used to house fries that McDonald's orders, and they come frozen in bags. And so it's about the size of like a small Rubbermaid, not one of the big ones that you usually have in your basement with winter clothes or something in it, but it's about half that size. They're all just kind of packed in there. And so it's fairly space saving while we don't have a place that we can actually display them. So anyways, that was just a little add-on. So
Okay, so I think for me, yes, I enjoy collecting things. I just enjoy, I think, I enjoy seasons of being obsessed with collecting things, I think is how I would phrase it, because
okay.
it's not like it's not like I have something that I'm constantly been collecting and have, been collecting for years and years or whatever, but it kind of comes in waves. So as a kid, I enjoyed I think, and a part of it was, I think, my parents, but like with those small Kinder Surprise toys.
Oh yeah.
We'd all collect those together, and then my parents would like put them into this Ritz cracker tin or whatever. And then Sunday afternoons, when they didn't want to deal with us, they would throw the tin in the middle of the floor or whatever, and then we just go ham on it, because we would just be able to enjoy like pulling out all these like little Kinder Egg Surprise that we hadn't really seen in a while. I don't know, like it was just like kind of being able to re-experience some of those toys. So
Right. Yeah.
so that was fun. And then also Happy Meal toys, we would collect those. I know Burger King did something where when the Lord of the Rings movies came out, and they had like
right. They had all those different characters.
Yeah, all those like characters that you could like join together, and then there was like a ring in the middle.
Yes.
So that they would all like activate and stuff, whether it's like voice or light or whatever. So we tried collecting all those, because like my dad used to like read us the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit series. So, but we didn't manage to get all of them at all. Like we probably got maybe halfway, but that was fun. So, I think things like that have kind of helped with cultivating in me like an appreciation for collecting different things. So, but oddly enough, I feel like as I grew up, I more collected like skills or like hobbies. So like, for example, like juggling, I'd learn how to juggle, whether it's like cubes or rings, or I learned how to do a bunch of different magic tricks, or I learned how to do yo-yo tricks. Or there was even a season where I learned how to solve a Rubik's Cube. I was super slow. I wasn't one of those speedy ones, but I learned how to solve it. And so I was so proud of that. At camp, I went up for the talent show and was like, I'm going to solve this Rubik's Cube.
Oh, no.
And unfortunately, they all thought that I was going to solve it within like 30 seconds, which not at all. So I was there for probably about 2 minutes while I got the jokester of the camp to like come up and tell some jokes. And eventually I was told, go sit down. You know, like we got to keep the show on the road. So there I was in the back fiddling with the Rubik's Cube. And then I was able to proudly hold it up to like the 3 people who were next to me and show them that, yes, I did solve that Rubik's Cube after about 15 minutes.
They didn't just let you go back up on stage and say, hey, look, I solved it?
They may have if I had asked for it, but I think that ship had sailed. So, yeah. Or like, Cat's Cradle string figures. So that kind of whole thing. So, and all of those, I had like books on them, and that were kind of like teaching me how to do these different things. And they were all, I think, meant to just like provide entertainment while also impressing people with like how cool I am that I can do these fun little things, so
and I can solve a Rubik's Cube in 15 minutes.
Cool, guys. The women were flocking to see me solve that Rubik's Cube. Anyways.
Oh, no.
So, and then I probably, switching gears a little bit, I think I collected things that would not show my skill necessarily, but like still entertain people. So that would be like collecting like riddles or jokes. Those are pretty easy just to like pull up. Or like games on my phone for like road trips so that like we'd have like something to, play, so whether that be chess or a bunch of other different random apps that I won't get into because then our viewers will start judging me. Not in a bad way, but like, but then I think then it would shift more to, like also board games as well, was something that like I purchased. I've purchased a wealth of them. Ashlynn can attest to that, and maybe an unhealthy wealth of them, and maybe to the point where I don't have much wealth because of them. But like I have purchased them, and each one I've bought for a specific reason that like. I feel that this game could entertain me and my friends, and we'd have a good time playing it, right? So I wouldn't necessarily buy something because it looked cool or it was like, or it seemed to have a cool mechanic or something. Like I would usually do enough research into it to see like, is this the type of game that like does well and people have generally accepted it? So,
right. Because Holly and I have gotten into board games in the last few years as well, and there's definitely lots of games that strike you as the artwork is very pleasing, and the gameplay seems relatively simple, so I could teach large amounts of people. But then you take a step back and go, okay, but are we actually going to play this game? Yeah. But also, how much does this game cost? Yep. And then those are all factors that you actually have to think about. So it is really easy to just fall into that that pit of games everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and I think I've reached the threshold. And this also I think delves into my next thing, which is more just like personal entertainment. And so I think from our last episode on like books and the books that we appreciate, what was kind of revealed was that I'm the kind of person who I like to keep my books in mint condition, which makes it so that I can't really lend them out unless like people sign like a waiver form or whatever, which like they're not super keen on, because they actually can just get the same book out of the library and they're fine with that and they can treat it as they like. So
you can dog ear the pages and stuff.
Yeah.
As I kind of mentioned in a previous episode about books, I do like unspoiled, tangible things. So when it's like a new release or there's no scratches on the disc, and they have their slip sleeves or their O-rings and they don't have a sticker on it that says, now a major motion picture. I mean, for the movies, that's not an issue because they are a motion picture. But for the books, I like that cover artwork that's not reliant on images taken from the movie. I like the stuff that was done prior, or I like the first edition stuff usually. And just so you know what I'm talking about when I say O-rings. O-rings are those slips that go over top of DVDs or Blu-rays. And slip covers are usually just open on one end and they slide out like a book or a movie in a collectible sheath does. And I only have a couple of those, but the O-rings are the ones that are open on the top and the bottom that just slide up and down freely. Those are the ones you usually see. And the reason that those things are collectible is because they almost always only come with the first printing of that disc.
Didn't know
So
that.
when the movie's first released on shelves, they'll come with those slipcases. But, 3 years later, when you're looking for it on Amazon, you might find a new release version of it from 2 years later, and that won't usually have the slipcase. That isn't always the case, but it's generally the case. So
Pun intended.
those are the kinds of things. Yeah. Those are the kinds of things that I look for when I'm collecting movies. And I really, really hate when a company or a studio takes and redoes the cover just because it's been a couple of years since they've released that image. And this is most apparent if you have an iTunes account. You will often see your iTunes movie profile pictures changing and being a little bit more stylized every couple of years. And that's whatever, that's digital. But when I'm collecting a series of something and suddenly 20th Century Fox or Disney, I guess Disney now owns Fox, or DreamWorks decides, it's been a couple of years since we released these movies, let's do it again and change up the covers. But I'm in the middle of collecting a series of something. Suddenly I'm either having to decide, do I want to pay $100 for this 4-year-old version of the movie, which is completely outrageous, and I'm not going to do it, or do I just sit there and wish that I had purchased it 4 years earlier when the first edition came out? So
No, I will never buy Chris a movie. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I can admit that most of the books that I own are pretty much solely for myself. And also the fact that I can then display them and people can you get to know a person by the books that they pick. Obviously, the problem is with both board games and books is I've reached the threshold where I've bought so many that it causes the value of entertainment that I get from each individual one to go down substantially.
Right.
So it's kind of like a graph, right? Where the more you buy, the less actually you appreciate each one individually because you have such a wealth of them. It means that you have more options, but it means that the ones that you appreciate actually don't end up getting played maybe as much as you would have liked, or the book that you really appreciated, you actually don't end up rereading because you have so many more books that you still haven't read, but you still bought. So
right.
You've become almost...
That reminds me of a certain parable that the prophet Nathan told in the Bible. Do you remember that one?
Isn't that one where he...
Oh, about King George and his ducky?
Accuses the king of adultery?
Yeah.
Yep. If you have so many that you don't value them, and if you have just one, you value it very much.
And that was
Talking about
directly an
wives?
analogy for board games.
Yeah.
It applies perfectly.
I can see where you're coming from. Yeah. I think the more you end up getting and buying possessions, I think the more that they can end up you think that you're in control in terms of your buying purchases and such, but it actually does end up dictating your life. Now I've reached the point where I'm I actually have to start reading some of these books that I bought and haven't actually read yet. So it means that I'm actually forcing myself. I'm not being able to reread the books that I've enjoyed, but I actually need to keep reading through my collection first before I can dive back. So I've kind of put myself in a bit of a rut. So as of yet, I haven't bought a ton of board games or books or anything like that in the last year, I would say. And it's been going pretty good. I'm steadily getting through them, and Ashlynn and me have actually started working through all of our board game collection with the 2-player kind of versions of each of them.
Right.
And just kind of giving them all ratings, seeing how we enjoy them. So, and I think even through that, I can then be able to see, okay, is there any board games that maybe I can give away or give up, you know, and just sort of let go. Let go and let God, or, I don't know what that's the case.
I'd be interested as to why, and this seems to be a pretty common thing with people that really, really love books, and to the point where it's in movies and TV shows and cartoon strips, where people will have a stack of books on their nightstand, and the running joke is that they have to keep reading. They can't go to sleep because they have 12 more books that they have to get through that they just haven't gotten to. That seems like something that's somewhat socially acceptable. And yet if you told somebody, I have 20 games that I have never played, or I have 13 movies that I have not watched but have purchased, suddenly people think you're less because they're not books, and books mean smart or something. Is this just me that has come to this conclusion, or?
I disagree.
Okay.
I also disagree.
I think it's crazy that you own books that you haven't read.
Okay, that's fair.
Oh, Holly, that resonated with me.
I do though think that like a stack of books that you haven't read but you're planning to read
Right.
does look a lot better than a stack of movies that you've bought and
Right.
never watched or whatever. So I do think that looks better.
But still not great. Still doesn't look great.
But for no good reason.
All right, Ashlynn, what you got?
Oh, dear.
Ashlynn, tell us about your great collections.
Your wealth of them.
Okay. I've been throwing shade this whole episode and having a lot of fun doing it.
Because you've collected that shade, throughout the entire episode so that you could chuck it at it. Right?
I have been.
Yeah.
I think with the relationship between me and collecting, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I am a saver and not a spender. And that affects a lot of my decisions. I don't go to the extreme because I am a privileged middle-class person, and so I can spend money just for fun.
Right.
And that's a privilege that I'm able to enjoy. But when I was a kid, I really liked doing crafts and getting craft kits. But if they were a craft kit that you could only do once, like it was, a single craft that you could make, and then once you were done it, that was just done. Like you could decorate a picture frame or something like that, and there was just the one. I wouldn't do them. I would just save them for the perfect occasion, which never came.
Right.
And just because I was a saver and not a spender, and once I did it, then it's like I didn't have that birthday present anymore because it was gone now because I already used it. But what if it was a reusable craft? Really liked those. Because then I could actually participate in it without feeling bad. So my mom would often crack open the boxes and be like, Ashlynn, you're doing your craft now. Because, or else I would just keep it and wouldn't use it. So I have that sense of, a collector in the sense of, not wanting to spend one-time things. And so because of that, I purposely don't spend my money on something I'm only going to use once. I want to be able to spend my money on things that I'm going to get multiple uses out of.
Other than food.
Well, obviously, yeah. So I don't really see the point in buying books if I think there's been maybe 1 or 2 books in my entire lifetime of novels that I have ever reread. And so for me, books are more of a one-time use thing, is that there's so many books I want to read, and I just I don't reread a whole lot of books. So why would I spend my money on something that I'm only going to be using once anyways? So I would much rather just go and get it out from the wonderful Saskatoon Public Library system, which is phenomenal, by the way. You can get so many things from it. And growing up, we didn't own a whole lot of movies. We would rent a lot of movies or get a ton of stuff from the library.
Same.
That was our a huge source of movies as well as video games. When the library started stocking those, or you could start renting them, that was a really common thing for our family to do. So I never really got into the collection habit. I would say that if you were to go through my house and find some items, physical items that I have more of than a random person, there would be those. I have an obscene number of water bottles and thermoses because I really enjoy them. But
Ashlynn's a drinker.
I'm very hydrated, okay? But I think if you were to actually go through my bank statements, you'd be able to see that I haven't actually spent money on water bottles and thermoses, at least in the last 2 years. Probably more, just because I end up getting them in promotional objects or as gifts.
Right.
Or,
yeah, they're a pretty common thing.
Exactly. With the Starbucks app, you can collect stars and then get a water bottle or whatever.
That's kind of like one of the best
So I don't think it's something I'm
collecting
spending money
hobbies
on.
to have, though, isn't it? Like, that's one of the best collecting hobbies to have, is to be able to have something where you will be able to get more of it for free. So it doesn't actually pool your resources. So that you can still feed your collecting,
your other
hobby
collections.
nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. But I have been throwing shade because I can honestly say that I do not understand a collector's mindset of like, I have to own all these things, and just knowing that they are in my possession brings me joy. That's something that I don't entirely even comprehend, because that just seems like just straight up materialism to me. And I know that that's not how collectors perceive it, but that's how I perceive it. And so I just legitimately don't understand it.
It's completely a
I can honestly
personality
say
thing
that.
for sure.
Yeah. I don't know whether if it's just like some of the way that I grew up, or the fact that I'm more of a saver than a spender, so I don't understand that aspect of it. But yeah, if it's something that's legitimately bringing you joy, I'm fine with it. Like, I'm married to Greg. We have a ton of board games and books in this house, and I am happily live here. But I legitimately don't get it.
For listeners, you're not able to see this, but behind Ashlynn is a wall of books and movies, and
movies, and board games.
Yeah, so which I've been able to look longingly at this entire episode.
That's funny.
Yeah, but no, I definitely.
And my phone is resting on my single shelf of books that I own, and they're all books that I really like.
That's fair.
Yeah. I think I can say that there is a healthy way of collecting and there's an unhealthy way. And I think it might be different for every person. They kind of have to gauge it. And
Sure.
So that's where, like, I think for me, I've realized that I'm like over on the unhealthy side. And I'm needing to whittle my way back to the more healthy side. So I'm working on it. I'm a work in progress. But yeah, I definitely think that collections can end up consuming you more than they should, and but at the same time, I think collections can also like provide a lot of joy and give you just like a fun way to like just be able to depending on what it is, but just be able to actually like sit back, enjoy, and have like a source of entertainment, and also I think just ability to be able to kind of share your personality a bit, because again, like I was saying before, like it does reflect a bit of who you are by what you collect. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely have recognized in especially some of the members of my family that are much older, you can see how when they were really, really young and their families were starting off with next to nothing, and they grow up with this mindset of anything that I get is an accomplishment or is worthy to be saved and saved for later, because you had that fear as a child of not knowing where the next meal or the next activity was going to come from. And so you get into that dangerous zone of starting to hoard things strictly out of a childhood sense of insecurity. And so what made me think of that was when Ashlynn was talking about saving these one-off crafts. It's not like she suddenly became a hoarder at the age of 6 because she didn't want to do a craft that could only last once. But it's that same
mentality.
Thought process for people that I don't understand who do start hoarding things. And I'm sitting here in what I feel like is a collector's chair going, well, how could you ever get to that point? And then Ashlynn's sitting there in the very, very beginner collector's chair going, well, how could you ever get to that point? And so it's definitely a range. There are definitely benchmarks along the way where you can see, oh, this has gotten too far. But it definitely does change for each person depending on their personality. Not to vindicate how many movies I have, but just to say I definitely don't expect the same thing from other people that I do for myself. except for when it comes to buying incomplete movie sets that the studio releases. Then you're on your own.
So that's fair. I can understand that.
But if there was one thing that you had to collect, we appreciate you saving up your time to spend it with us.
Aw.
So continue listening and continue to subscribe where we are available, and reach out to us and let us know what you thought about the episode and what you feel like would be a good topic for us to cover in the future, and we would love to interact with you. Until next time, that's all.
Goodbye!